Now, if you're first starting out and you're wanting to make furniture that sells, and you were to look it up on either just Google or YouTube, they're going to recommend making Farmhouse furniture. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of Farmhouse.
Boo this man!
Not because I think it's not real furniture or it's easy to make or it doesn't. I just don't like the style, but I do know that there is still a large market for it.
It's the best. I love it.
Now, the good thing about a Farmhouse is it's easy to make, and there's multiple ways you can make it, and you can have limited tools. In fact, this can be built with just 2 tools, and those 2 tools can vary. And I'm going to show you how you can do that. Now, about a week ago, I went to my local home store, and I selected 5.
All American made, 2x4.
They cost a little less than $5 a piece, but I will round up just so we can work with whole numbers. Now, if you download the plans, you're going to see that I gave you a cut list based on 2 8-foot boards. That is if you want to make the whole thing out of 2x4. Now, the first thing we're going to do is make 2 of these H's, and we're going to start off by cutting 4 legs out, and we could do that with the 2x4, and let me show you how. Now, one of the things that you want to do is inspect your wood before you start cutting. So you see this right here, I don't want that to be part of my table legs. It just looks ugly, it's unprofessional, so I'm going to make a cut right here. Let's just cut the end off with a saw. Now here is where I'm going to measure in 24.5 inches because I do not mind cutting a little big so I can make sure that I have a little bit of leeway for any errors that I may make or if I lose wood in the process of squaring it up. Now, once again, I can cut this with my handsaw or my chop saw.
A few minutes later.
All right, so because I'm using hardwood for the top, you'll notice that I have quite a bit of 2x4 left over. If you were making this, the top with this, you'd want to continue to make cuts on this that are about 13 inches. But what I needed to do was get everything else. So I got 2 of these pieces at 24 inches long. That's going to be my legs. Four of these, they're cut to 11.25-ish. I went a little fast. Those are going to be these pieces here because I'm going to resaw them and make all 8. And then these 4, actually I think I only need 3, but these 4 are going to make this piece right here. And I'm going to also resaw those as well so I can get them down to about 1/2 inch. But you don't have to go with that. That's the beauty of this. When we start putting it together and making the dados right there for it, you just make it whatever width you decide to make these pieces, and then you just make this piece the same as that width and everything matches. Now, when it comes to resawing, option number 1 is handsaw. Now, when you get a handsaw, something like this is not going to work. Make sure it doesn't have the neck, the spine, the back, whatever you want to call this thing, because it's not going to go through. You're going to end up getting stuck right here and you can't cut any further. That's useless. You're going to want something like this. Doesn't have to be this saw exactly, but you don't want any spline or anything on there. You want it to be able to just go through smoothly. With that said, even if you are going to use the handsaw, you got to be careful is the grain. So let's say you get it 90 degrees and you're cutting, you got it right down the middle here and you're cutting it and your saw is flat and you're going along. Well, eventually, if you are not paying attention, you're going to allow the grain to guide the saw, not your hand to guide the saw. And then eventually it will follow the grain like this grain is, and boom. Now what you have is when you get to the bottom is it starts, you see how much thicker it is on the bottom here and how much thinner this piece is on the bottom over here. And then this one's unusable because you can't get the 1/2 inch or whatever it is you're trying to get to. And then this one, you're milling off a bunch of wood, which is extra time. Now, the next way you could do it is with your table saw. Now, so what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to find the middle of the board. This is the right way to do it. And then lower the blade towards just under that. There it is. And then you're going to run it through this way. Flip it over. Run it through this way. And if you did your measurements right, you should have just a little piece of wood connecting it together. Then that's a lot less cutting for your saw, for your hand saw, and it would be that much faster. And lastly, the one that I'm going to use is the bandsaw because I do have one. Now, the good thing about this design is we're not resawing anything extra large. So if you don't have a floor model or a large one, if you have a benchtop one, this will work. You could still do it. You do not have to have really expensive equipment to make this particular design. Now, the only thing I'm going to recommend is make sure you have the right kind of teeth. This one is basically made for rip sawing. It's 3 TPI. And I'm in the process of changing out I had a sacrificial fence on here. I'm going to put it on again later, but for now, since these are small enough, we're just going to go ahead and run all, I think 8 of them through. So I'm going to end up with 16 of these and 4 of the leg pieces. I like to face them all up to where the cut side is up. That's how I do my milling, is I always try to work on the cut side. So this is the side that was went through the bandsaw. And then part of my milling process, as always, even if I'm pretty sure that it's flat, is I go ahead and take about 5 seconds to mark this. So when it goes through, I can make sure that I got all the edges and everything, and so it's completely flat. And then I like to look in advance and see which side I want to do my edge jointing on after I did my face.
There's a movie montage happening right now, and you could see it if you just close your eyes. We're learning, improving, we're figuring it out. The passage of time is implied. Show me what you're working on, man, and I'll shake my head, yes or no. Show it to me once, come on, show it to me twice, and I'll give you that thumbs up sign. You know that it only works in the movies when they're rushing towards the end. Our lives drag on, we're just waiting in lines, and we never call on our friends. There's a movie montage happening right.
So my 2 finishing sizes right now are the legs. There's 4 of those. They're 24 inches long, and then it's how thick you want them to be as long as they're square. I like 1.25 inches by 1.25 inches, but if something comes up in the milling process and you make a mistake and you can get it down to 1 1/8 square or 1 inch square, both of those will be just fine. So there's a lot of flexibility in here, and it helps people who may make mistakes. Maybe you found a knot. Maybe there's just something about the wood that you needed to cut past. And then you'll have 16 of these, 3 inches, 1/2 inch in deep. And then the length is going to depend on if you want the top to be made out of the same material or not. If you don't want the top to be made out of the same material, you can cut all of these to be 11 inches long. If you want the top to be made out of the same material, then you're going to want 4 of them cut to 13 inches long. Now, the next step is we're going to take out 4 of these. We're going to glue them together, and let's get that done. Like that. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to put a rabbet like this on the top of your legs, and let me show you how I do that. So first, let's grab our sled and then set the height of the blade to equal the width of the 11-inch pieces. Then we're going to grab one of our legs and set the stop block to just a tad under 3 inches. And we are going to take a swipe at a time. And then with the blade, it's 1/8 of an inch a piece. So we're going to just keep going all the way across. Now, when you're doing this, make sure that you keep an eye on your fingers. And then afterwards, we're going to check the fit. And I usually do it less than 3 inches. So when it's time, I can make sure that the fit is good. And now we're going to do the other side as well.
A few minutes later.
All right, now that we're done, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to put a double rabbet on the same side, about 3 inches or whatever your design is. You can decide how far up you go. I like 3 inches. That's why I have it on mine. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take 2 of your 11-inch pieces, 2 of your legs, and really all you need for this, if you have clamps, is wood glue. And I do recommend any kind of square that you may have just to verify and check that it's square, but I'm going to be using my 18 gauge pin nailer because the way we finish it, you'll never notice that they're there. I use 1-inch ones because they don't need to be very long. Once we do the 2 H's, install's pretty easy, form fit, make sure there's no surprises. And then for each piece on top, use some wood glue. Go ahead and use a square of some sort to verify that it is square before you nail it in. Or if you have clamps, you could just clamp the whole thing together with or without 90 degrees clamps, but the 90-degree clamps make it easier. Next thing we're going to do after we get all 4 top pieces is then we are going to flip it over and we are going to do the exact same thing on the bottom. Wood glue, pin nails, clamps, however you want to put them in. Then always check for square, and then at the end, measure to make sure that the base is the same distance, lengthways, and crossways. Next, let's grab that bottom shelf piece and sand it up. Get it all nice and smooth. Sand it to whatever finish. I'm only going to 120, and then get off any remaining glue. After this, we're going to go to the table saw, and we're going to use our crosscut sled to make 1 in 90, and then use the stop block, set it to 11 inches. And you would know this because you just measured the table to make sure it's square. And now you're going to go ahead and cut that, make it nice and square. Now to get this bottom piece to fit in, we do have to notch out the 4 corners for the legs. The legs are 1 1/4 inch square. So I used this little piece of scrap wood and I cut out a notch that was 1 1/4 inch in each direction. And this allows me to put it up against the blade, and then I can see where my fence stops, and then I can go ahead and use a clamp to put my stop block. Then I'm going to grab the board, and then I'm going to cut a notch out of each corner. And then once that is done, I will be able to place that inside the table and knock it home. Okay, so we have everything put together. Of course, we're going to go into the finishing next. But what I wanted to go over with you real quick is how you put your top on. When it comes to the top, my favorite things to use are these. I don't know the exact name for them. I just type in figure 8 tabletop fasteners, and then I always find what I'm looking for. They don't have to be big, but if you have a bigger table, you might want one. And this also allows for wood movement. So basically what I'm going to do is I am going to just take this little section right here on all 4 corners, and I'm just going to route this whole little thing. And I could have just made it a little bit smaller, but I figured why try to offset when I could just use a router real quick. And then I'm going to screw this down so it's flush on all 4 of these corners. And then I will add everything together after I have already finished. Now I know those fasteners are only about 1/8 of an inch thick, but you still want to go ahead and use the fastener to adjust the height of your router so you can make sure that it is right where it needs to be. Also, the bit that I'm using is a simple 1/8 bit, so you're not talking about a whole lot of bits sticking out. So this is a very good way to practice your router if you're not comfortable with it yet. And then once you do all 4 corners, we'll go ahead and move on to the finishing. So if you wanted to, right now, you could paint this thing white. You can put a little bit of finish on the top. You're good to go. But what I'm going to do is show you how I finish it to give it this rustic, antique look. And I'm going to show you how I do it. You only need 3 things. 1, Any kind of coppered, brown, whatever you want. I had this laying around in the shop. I don't know who bought it, but it was here, so I tried it. White paint. Doesn't matter what kind of white paint it again. Once again, as long as you have white paint. And something to sand with. That's all you need. So let me show you my steps. Now, the first step is to go ahead and spray paint the whole thing. The paint does not need to be applied completely perfectly even. If it is a little heavy in one spot or light in another, that is okay, because the next step is going to be paint over it anyways. Make sure you are wearing a mask if you have one, or do this outside and wear a mask at the same time if you can. The good thing about spray paint is that it dries fairly quickly within a couple hours, and now you can apply your paint. This one you do want to try to get as smooth as possible. You're never going to remove all streaks, but at least have all the streaks going in the same direction, and try to make it as uniform as you can. Once you have it all painted, then you're going to go ahead and let it dry. I let mine dry for 24 hours. And then the next day is when we do the last step of the finish. That would be sanding. Now you can do hand sanding, or you can go ahead and do what I do, which is I put 100 grit on my orbital sander and I go gingerly. If you spend too much time in one spot, you will expose wood. Once you do that, you just do it on all the spaces that you need to, and boom, you have an antique looking finish. Last thing we need to do is attach the top. We start off by putting your figure 8 fasteners in place. You're going to pre-drill using a drill bit that's just slightly smaller than the screws that you're going to be drilling in. And then when you do drill the screws in, make sure that you are not over tightening. You want those to have a little bit of wiggle room so they can move with the wood movement. Next, we need to take it and put it upside down on top of the top so we can space it out and draw circles where we need to pre-drill. When you pre-drill, make sure you use the same bit and you're as close to 90 degrees as possible. And the last step is to screw the top to the base. Just remember, you do not need to over tighten these. So there you go. It took $20, less than 3 hours of labor. So I reached out to a local home decor store. They sell furniture, especially the people that go there like the farmhouse style furniture. Now, she seemed to think that she should be able to sell them with the walnut tops for about $150. Now, that means that, let's say it took me $20 for the pine, I'd say about at $7.50 a board foot, which is what I get walnut for here. And we'll round up, add incidentals, and then let's say it did cost me $50 in material, which I don't think it did, but I like that's a round number. If I sell them for $150, that means there's $100 left over. That means I'm giving myself $50 an hour if I can build them in 2 hours, which I should be able to do if I'm not building them piecemeal and separately. Now, for you, what that means is if you just want them for your house, bam, they're good to go. Enjoy them. If you want them so you want to be able to sell them, same thing. You can sell them. Farmhouse is always a big thing. It still is. That's it. Now, if you want to start making these to make yourself a little bit of extra money so you could buy some tools and you need to know where you want to put those tools, watch this video here. Or if you want to know how to save some money, watch that video there.
We should probably get going now.